Madami was also there for the representative of Factory CRG. So we signed a deal, and my actually first race was with Dave on CRG, was with Dave Davies. And so the plan was that they were going to have me race the East Coast events, because at that time, Stars of Karting had the East Coast Championship, West Coast Championship, and then we'd all come together in Vegas for the finale championship, which was a pretty cool system where, you could just do an East Coast Championship and still become a national champion, if you had enough points, more points than the West Coast champion, going into the last race in Vegas, and whoever had the most points at the end. But long story short, I started racing with Dave Davies on the East Coast, and then Randy Neal with PCH Motorsports on the West Coast and SSC, and Mike Speed was the team manager there at PCH Motorsports, and he actually had a huge influence of me getting over there also. He was the kind of the guy pushing for it, because I didn't know this, but Randy Neal told me this years after, that when Mike and Mattia came up to Randy and said, like, hey, we want to push for this guy. We need this guy in the team, because Randy was looking for a good driver in the shifter category. And they said, this guy right here, they wanted me to come over, and they knew that I was available, being that I left Track Magic. And I guess Randy literally sat down, like, before they even got the whole, spiel out, he's like, nope, that kid will never be on my team. And, because he saw the Track Magic image and, how I was when I was younger. And he's like, that kid will never, ever be on my team. And then, I guess I had to sweet talk him. And then finally Randy agreed to meet with me. And I remember going into the meeting with Mike Speed and Mattia, and they're explaining, it's like, no foul language. These people are, very family oriented. There's a lot of young kids around here. We gotta be on our best behavior if you want this thing to go through. And so we did the meeting, and I don't know who had pulled the strings or convinced Randy or begged him enough, but Randy ended up saying yes. And we started the deal with CRG, and from there, it kind of started a snowball effect of, we started winning a lot of races together. It seemed like every race that we went to with the CRG product, it was, nothing against the Track Magic guys at the time, but, it took me from, barely winning races or fighting to win races to Randy and Mike getting on the sidelines and telling me to slow down, because the lead looked a little bit too big at times, and they didn't want it, people start thinking we were cheating, which they ended up anyways, but that's another story to tell, I guess. But, it was really good. Our program was extremely strong. Rainey with the engines, with the Maxer engines, Mike Speed on the CRG material, and with Mattia Madami coming from the factory and helping us there. And then Randy Neal, if anyone remembers his operation in PCH, if they showed up today with that operation, many people would never remember PCH, but they showed up today, it would put everything to shame again. And this, we're talking back in 2006, almost 14 years ago. And that operation, the cleanliness, the professionalism, the
popcorn machine.
How do you say it? Yeah, the popcorn machines, the blender. They had everything, anything, the image. Everything. The kiwi tile, the big hauler. The thing was absolutely beautiful. Showing up to the track, had Big Tom putting tire shine on the tires and waxing the whole deal. There was just. It was a NASCAR hauler, which actually was an old NASCAR hauler, with a go-kart team running out of it. So it was absolutely beautiful, and Randy did everything 100% and more. It didn't matter what it took. He was in the business of winning races, and whatever testing we needed, whatever materials we needed, how many tires we needed, how much gas we needed, it didn't matter. For him, it was there was one goal, one vision, and it was to win. And whatever he saw, or whatever Mike Speed, Rainey, or Matthias said that they needed at their disposal. But, yeah, he made. If they said they needed one, he'd make sure they had two just in case, kind of program. So, it was very. I'm very fortunate to be a part of that program because we showed up to Super Nationals that year, and it was just that. I mean, it was just Alex Speed and I underneath the tent, and there was one goal for the whole team, and it was to win. And luckily, Giancarlo Tonini, the owner of CRG, and Danilo Rossi, the CRG race team manager at the time, showed up to that race to kind of give support, and also obviously to have meetings with Randy and Joe Ramos from SSC and all the other CRG importers back then, or dealers and stuff. At PSL at the time was still a huge CRG dealer in Canada, and I had a really good race there where we swept the whole weekend, and Danilo Rossi actually, and this is one of my 5 biggest accomplishments that I consider I've done, and it wasn't winning the race at Super Nationals. To have Danilo Rossi come up to me and say, "That was perfect, like perfect race. I don't have anything else to tell you. That was perfect."
Now explain to the listeners that don't know, who's Danilo Rossi?
Danilo Rossi is, I think he's won the World Championship 5 or six times. Yeah. Considered one of the all-time greats of karting, and he started his own race team. Now has his own karting line, the DR race kart line, always in with CRG. CRG produces products, and like I said, he was the race team manager at CRG. He had his own DR racing team, which his brother ran when they were running with CRG karts, and now they have their own DR kart line. But, and Danilo Rossi is one of the hardest team managers I've ever come across. And I guess when we kind of get into the story, when I went to Europe, we can explain some of that. But, from that race, he said, I think, him seeing what I did there at that race, and me being an American, and Tonini was always trying to push to have an American driver on the factory team because he figured it'd be really good publicity for the CRG brand, and maybe, if Americans or North Americans saw that they had a North American driver on the factory team doing well, and basically could make it almost like a little stepping stone program. If you do well enough in North America, we can, you might have a shot to get a factory ride. So Danilo and Mr. Tonini, after that race, called, and they offered me a test where I could come to do their official winter test, where they had all the official factory drivers go down to southern Italy for 5 days and do the test. And they also invited Jacob Neal to do the test. So it was myself, Mike Speed, Randy Neal, and Jacob Neal that went down for the test in January. It was 5 days, 3 days at one track and 2 days at the other. And the test went well enough where Danilo pulled me aside with Randy and Mike and said, we'd like myself, we'd like Gary, being myself, to come do a race. So I can't remember if I went back home. Yeah, I think I went back home, and then in March, I went back to Italy and did a WSK race in Sarno, Italy. And I never seen the track before and everything, no testing. And I showed up, and the WSK at that time was where KZ1, which I guess then it was called Super ICC then, maybe. But it doesn't matter. I guess equivalent to KZ1 and KZ2 drivers drove all together in one class. It was just KZ at that time. And there was all the huge names were there. The Artigos, Tonelli, Manetti, Lammers, Tanon was my teammate there at CRG. And at that time, Tanon was reigning world champ and, the guy to beat and everything. And had a really good race. At the end, I finished 6th, which even Danilo said it was really impressive He's had a lot of American drivers come over, and they never even, let alone be in the top 10. He said normally they don't even make the final. They don't even make the race, and you're running around in the top 10 in your first race I've ever seen on the track. So from literally that race on, they told me they still wanted me to do all the races in North America, but they said they wanted me to do the whole European Championship that year. So, and then at that time, to do the European Championship, you couldn't go straight into the KZ1 category. You had to do the European Championship in KZ2, which I think was called ICC then. And you had to get sixth or better in the European Championship to go up to the KZ1. But, that year I did the amount of miles I did flying was absolutely incredible. One, just flying around North America, because I was doing the Stars East and West Championships, and then I was doing the European Championship with selected WSK races over in Europe. And to be honest, the amount I was racing, testing, I was doing all the testing that I would do was in North America. For the European races, unfortunately, I would just show up and race with no testing involved. But that year, I was in a go-kart all the time. It was almost every weekend or during the week. I never went more than probably 6-7 days without sitting in a go-kart or even racing, let alone just even testing. So I think my skills and everything, and there's probably that was my strongest periods of my career as a driver, and it was just because I was in the go-kart all the time and racing all the time. But it was a great experience. I think after the very first race I had that I did in Europe, I had a mechanic that spoke broken English, and if anyone remembers, there was Bola. Actually, it was my mechanic for my very first race.
Okay.
Famous Bola. And he could speak, broken English at the time. And then after that very first race, when I was, deemed a factory supported driver from CRG, and this was doing the European Championship, Mr. Tonini, naturally always used to address me in English because I didn't speak any Italian. But when I was announced as an official driver, he told me the last time he ever spoke English to me was, he told me, now that you work for an Italian team, you're an American, but you're a driver for an Italian team, you must speak Italian. And I never spoke to him in English again. And they will say, well, how do you speak to him? And then literally I had to start learning Italian. He gave me all mechanics that didn't speak English. And it was, it was told to me that I'm basically saying, you need to learn Italian. So I got the result.
Fluent?
A lot of people have asked that question, and to be honest, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. It's like one of those processes you start learning over time. When you're immersed in it and you're forced to do it. You start learning, phrases, and you obviously learn all the bad words first. And to be completely honest, I really started learning a lot when I started living there full time. And I met a girl that only spoke Italian, and you can rest assured, like when you really want something, you learn quick. Let's just say, to put it lightly, right? So
yeah, I remember one time it was at one of the Super Nats, and I can't remember what year it was, but it was after you had been in Europe for a little bit. You came back for the Super Nats, and I saw you come off the scales with your mechanic, and you were speaking fluent Italian. And I remember it clicking. It's like, man, he went all in, because the last time I had seen you, there were gaps where, I hadn't seen you for a few years because I stepped away from karting as a whole. I was like, man, this kid went all in. And you were just, it wasn't that broken Italian, or you weren't fumbling through it. You and your tuner were having a full-on Italian conversation as you came off the scales going back to the tent. It's like, man, right on Gary. It was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, there was periods that when I